Sera Vega had hidden the bruise for 3 days before Lorenzo Vitale noticed it. Not because she was careless, she had spent years learning exactly how to be invisible inside other people's houses, but because Lorenzo Vitale was not the kind of man who missed things, even things that were carefully, deliberately hidden from him. He found her in the laundry room at 10:45 on a Wednesday night, pressing a cold cloth against the inside of her forearm where a handprint had turned from red to a deep, spreading violet over the past 72 hours. She had not heard him come in. The first sign he was there at all was the sound of his breathing changing, a single sharp intake that cut through the quiet hum of the dryer behind her. "Who touched you?" he said. Not a question. An order wrapped in 3 words that carried enough controlled fury to make the temperature in the small room drop by several degrees. Sera pulled her sleeve down quickly, an old reflex, the specific muscle memory of a woman who had learned to conceal evidence the way other people learn to tie their shoes, automatically and without thinking. "It is nothing, Mr. Vitale. That is not what I asked." She looked at him properly for the first time since he had appeared in the doorway. Lorenzo Vitale at 10:45 at night looked considerably different from the man who moved through his estate during business hours, the careful suits replaced by a plain dark shirt, sleeves pushed to the elbows, the tattoo along his right forearm fully visible. He was 37, dark-haired, the kind of face that looked like it had been assembled from sharp angles and old decisions. His expression right now held nothing careful about it at all. Sera had worked as the head of household staff at the Vitale estate for 2 years. She was 30, plus size, dark hair she kept braided close during work hours, steady hands, a face that gave away very little unless she specifically chose to let it. She had taken this job because it paid well, because the estate was large enough to feel like its own small country, and because working for a man whose reputation preceded him by several city blocks meant that very few people bothered her unnecessarily. The bruise on her arm had not come from inside this house. Lorenzo crossed the laundry room in 2 strides, stopping directly in front of her, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "Show me," he said, quieter now, the fury still present but controlled into something considerably more focused. Sera held his gaze for a long moment, weighing options she had been turning over for 3 days. Then she pushed her sleeve back up, slowly, exposing the full bruise, for distinct finger marks pressed deep into brown skin. Lorenzo looked at it. His jaw tightened so hard she could see the muscle jump beneath the skin. His right hand, the tattooed one, closed into a fist at his side and stayed there. "One name," he said. "Give me one name, Sera." "Philip Egan," she said. The name landed in the room like something heavy hitting concrete. Lorenzo's expression did not change, which told Sera considerably more than if he had visibly reacted. Philip Egan managed the Vitale family's catering contracts, a position that gave him regular access to the estate and, more importantly, regular proximity to the staff Sera supervised. "How long?" Lorenzo said. 3 incidents over 2 months, Sera said, her voice steady despite everything underneath it. "The first time he grabbed my wrist in the pantry hallway. I pulled free and told him clearly to never touch me again. The second time he cornered me near the loading dock after a delivery, told me nobody would believe the house manager over a man who had worked with your family for 9 years. This one," she gestured at her arm, "happened Sunday evening after I refused to give him access to the wine cellar outside of scheduled delivery hours." Lorenzo was very still for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped into something Sera had never heard from him before. A register below anger, below fury, somewhere in the territory of absolute, settled certainty. "Why did you not come to me after the first time?" he asked, and the question carried no accusation, only genuine, bewildered pain at the idea that she had carried this alone inside his own house for 2 months. "Because men in your position hear complaints from female staff and weigh them against the value of a 9-year business relationship," Sera said, honest in a way she had not fully planned to be. "I have worked in enough houses to know exactly how that calculation usually ends." Something cracked visibly behind Lorenzo's controlled expression. "That calculation does not exist in this house," he said. "Not for you. Not for anyone on my staff. That man touched you inside a building I am responsible for. Everything that happens under this roof is mine to answer for, and I failed to see it happening for 2 months. Sera felt something shift in her chest, a wall she had kept carefully in place for years, the specific defense mechanism of a woman who had learned never to expect protection from the men she worked for, developing its first visible crack. The following morning, Lorenzo called an emergency meeting of his senior staff in the estate's main study, a room Sera had cleaned hundreds of times, but had never once been invited into as a participant. She stood near the door, uncertain whether her presence was expected, until Lorenzo looked directly at her and gestured toward the chair beside his desk. "Sit," he said. "You are the reason this meeting is happening. You should be in the room when we decide what happens next." Sera sat, aware of the specific weight of every pair of eyes in the room turning toward her, Lorenzo's operations manager, his head of security Costa, his legal counsel, all of them clearly unsure why the household manager had been placed at the center of a meeting usually reserved for business-level decisions. "Philip Egan has been physically harassing a member of my household staff for 2 months, Lorenzo said, his voice carrying the flat, absolute control Sera recognized as the version of him that made grown men go very quiet very quickly. 3 separate incidents. The evidence is on her arm. This is not a discussion about whether it happened. This is a discussion about exactly how we handle it." Costa, the head of security, spoke first. "We can terminate his contract immediately and have him escorted off the property within the hour. Clean, quiet, no complications." "That is not sufficient," Lorenzo said. Boss Costa said carefully, "A quiet termination protects the estate from any legal complications Egan might try to create. I am not interested in protecting the estate from legal complications," Lorenzo said. "I am interested in making certain Philip Egan understands exactly what happens when someone touches a person under my roof without their consent. Quiet termination sends a message that this can be handled discreetly. I do not want discretion. I want clarity." Sera listened to this exchange with something complicated moving through her chest. The experience of watching a man with genuine power choose to use it not for quiet self-protection but for visible, unmistakable accountability. An experience she had genuinely never witnessed before in any household she had worked in. "What would you suggest?" his legal counsel asked Lorenzo carefully. Lorenzo looked at Sera. "What do you want to happen?" he asked, and the directness of the question, the fact that he was asking her instead of simply deciding, landed with more weight than anything else he had said that morning. Sera considered the question seriously, the same careful attention she brought to every responsibility she managed in this household. "I want him terminated publicly enough that every other vendor and contractor who enters this estate understands exactly why," she said. "And I want a formal complaint filed with the relevant authorities, documented properly, so there is a record that follows him regardless of where he works next." Lorenzo nodded once, sharp and final. "Do exactly that," he told his counsel. "Today. Before Egan has any opportunity to construct a version of events that contradicts what actually happened." Egan was terminated that afternoon in a meeting attended by his own management company, Lorenzo's legal team, and 2 witnesses from Sera's staff who corroborated the pattern of behavior she had described. The formal complaint was filed by end of day, documented with photographs of the bruising and written statements from 3 additional staff members who had witnessed Egan's behavior towards Sera on separate occasions but had not felt safe reporting it independently. The news moved through the estate staff within hours, and Sera noticed, over the following days, a specific shift in how her team carried themselves around her. Not pity, something closer to respect, the particular regard people extend toward someone who finally named a problem everyone had sensed but nobody had been willing to confront. 2 of her younger staff members, women who had worked under Sera's supervision for over a year, found her separately in the following days with their own difficult admissions. Lucia, a kitchen assistant barely 22, told Sera that Egan had made comments to her on 3 separate occasions that she had dismissed as uncomfortable but not reportable, only now understanding, in the light of what Sera had revealed, that the pattern had been building across multiple members of the staff simultaneously. "I thought it was just me being oversensitive," Lucia said, her voice small and uncertain. "He never actually touched me. He just stood too close, said things about how I looked while I was trying to work, and when I moved away he would laugh and tell me to relax." "That is not oversensitivity," Sera said firmly. "That is a man testing exactly how far he can push before someone pushes back. The fact that he never touched you does not mean what he did was acceptable. It simply means he had not escalated to you yet." The second staff member, an older woman named Grace who managed the estate's grounds maintenance, shared a considerably more disturbing account. Egan had cornered her in the supply shed 6 months earlier, blocking the exit while asking questions that had nothing to do with deliveries and everything to do with establishing how isolated she was in that part of the grounds during certain hours. I reported it to his management company directly, Grace said, visible frustration in her voice. They told me they would speak with him. Nothing changed. If anything, he became more careful about where and when he approached people, always in spaces without cameras, always during shift changes when fewer witnesses were around. Sera brought both accounts to Lorenzo the following morning, laying them out alongside her own documented incidents, and watched something settle into his expression that went considerably deeper than the controlled fury she had first seen in the laundry room. This was not isolated, Lorenzo said, his voice carrying a weight that told Sera he was processing something personal alongside the professional responsibility. This was systematic. He was testing multiple members of your staff, identifying who would report and who would stay quiet, building exactly the kind of pattern that relies on each person believing they are the only one. That is how it usually works, Sera said. The isolation is deliberate. If every target believes they are alone, nobody compares notes, and the pattern stays invisible. You made it visible, Lorenzo said quietly. By finally naming it, you gave Lucia and Grace permission to name it too. That took considerable courage, Sera. More than I think you give yourself credit for. It should not require courage to report something like this inside a workplace, Sera said. The fact that it does tells you exactly how broken most workplaces actually are when it comes to protecting the people working inside them. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression at that observation. The specific look of a man reconsidering assumptions he had held comfortably for years. What would you change, he asked. If you could redesign how this household handles these situations, from the ground up, what would you actually build? Sera studied him for a long moment, surprised by the genuine openness of the question. A direct reporting channel that does not route through the person's own supervisor first, she said. Anonymous if necessary, though in my experience, people are willing to attach their names to a complaint considerably more often when they believe it will actually be heard. Regular check-ins with staff, not about productivity, about whether they feel safe in their workspace. And a clear, visible consequence for anyone found to have violated another person's physical boundaries. Not a quiet termination that lets everyone pretend it never happened, but exactly what you did yesterday, visible, documented, and impossible to reinterpret. Then build it, Lorenzo said. Draw up whatever structure you think this household needs, and I will implement it. Not because it protects me legally, though it does. Because you are right that it should not require courage to be safe inside a building someone else is responsible for. Sera spent the following week designing exactly that, a comprehensive staff safety protocol considerably more thorough than anything she had encountered in any previous household she had managed, and presented it to Lorenzo with the same careful, precise attention she brought to every responsibility she held. This is exceptional work, Lorenzo said, reviewing the document. Considerably more thoughtful than anything my legal team would have produced on their own. Your legal team would have built it to protect the estate, Sera said. I built it to protect the people inside it. There is a meaningful difference. Lorenzo found her in the library that evening, 2 days after the termination, standing near the window watching the grounds settle into darkness. He had changed out of his business clothes into the same dark shirt she had first seen him wearing in the laundry room, sleeves pushed to the elbows, and something about the deliberate informality told Sera this was not a professional visit. How are you actually doing? He asked, joining her at the window, keeping a careful distance between them that told her he understood, probably better than most men would, exactly how important physical space was to someone who had recently had theirs violated. I am doing better than I expected, Sera said honestly. Watching you handle it the way you did, in the meeting, asking me what I wanted instead of deciding for me, that mattered considerably more than the actual termination itself. I should have seen it sooner, Lorenzo said, genuine regret in his voice. 2 months inside my own house. That is a failure on my part that I do not know how to fully account for. You cannot see everything that happens inside a building this size, Sera said gently. And I was deliberately hiding it from you, which makes it considerably harder to notice. Why, Lorenzo asked. Why hide it from me specifically? Sera considered the question carefully, something honest rising to the surface. Because I did not want to test whether you were actually different from every other man whose house I have managed, she said. I preferred believing you might be, without ever having to find out for certain. Testing that belief felt like a risk I was not ready to take. Something in Lorenzo's expression shifted at that, careful composure giving way to something more open. And now that you have tested it, he said quietly. Now I know the answer, Sera said, which feels considerably more solid than simply hoping. Over the following weeks, the careful professional distance between Sera and Lorenzo began dissolving in ways neither of them fully controlled. He stopped finding excuses to be wherever she was working and simply showed up openly, bringing coffee, asking genuine questions about how the household was running, staying longer than any of those conversations strictly required. The shift happened in small, specific moments rather than a single dramatic turning point. One afternoon, reorganizing the estate's wine cellar inventory, Sera discovered a section of bottles tucked behind a false panel at the back wall, dusty and clearly untouched for decades. She brought them carefully upstairs and spent an hour researching the labels before realizing the collection was worth considerably more than she had initially estimated. She brought her findings to Lorenzo that evening, spreading photographs and research notes across his study desk with the same careful precision she applied to everything. These were your grandmother's, she said. Based on the label dates and the import stamps, she brought them from Sicily in the late 1950s. Some of these vintages are essentially irreplaceable now. Lorenzo picked up one of the bottles carefully, turning it in his hands with an expression Sera had never seen from him before. Something soft and far away. A man holding a piece of a woman he clearly still missed. She used to talk about these, he said quietly. I thought they were lost during a renovation decades ago. I did not think to look behind a false panel. Most people do not think to look behind false panels, Sera said gently. That is rather the point of false panels. Something warm and slightly startled crossed Lorenzo's face. A laugh caught halfway, the kind of involuntary reaction Sera was learning meant she had surprised him in a way he genuinely enjoyed. You are funnier than most people in my life give you credit for, he said. Most people in your life have not spent 2 years organizing your pantry, Sera said. You learn a considerable amount about a person from how they store things. Your pantry suggests someone who values order but secretly keeps a bag of cheap supermarket cookies hidden behind the imported biscotti. Lorenzo's composure cracked fully at that, genuine laughter breaking through in a way that transformed his entire face, making him look 10 years younger and considerably less like the careful, controlled man the rest of the world encountered. You found the cookies, he said. I found the cookies on my second day, Sera said, smiling. I simply chose not to mention them, because everyone deserves at least one secret vice nobody comments on. That was the evening something fundamental shifted between them, not through any grand confession or dramatic moment, but through the simple, specific intimacy of someone knowing exactly where you hide your cheap cookies and choosing to keep that knowledge gently to herself. Sera found herself, despite the lingering wariness that 2 months of hidden bruising had reinforced, slowly letting her guard ease in his presence. He never stood too close without her moving toward him first. He never touched her, not even casually, without visible, deliberate awareness of the fact that someone else had recently taken that choice away from her. The specific, careful patience of it taught her something she had not fully believed possible, that a man this powerful could also be this genuinely, consistently gentle. Costa noticed the shift too, pulling Sera aside one morning with an expression that carried genuine warmth rather than the professional caution she expected. I have worked for this family for 14 years, Costa said. I watched Lorenzo's father run this estate, and I have watched Lorenzo run it since. His father smiled easily. Lorenzo has not, for years, not genuinely, not in a way that reached past the careful version he shows everyone. Whatever is happening between you two, I have not seen him laugh the way he laughed in his study last week in longer than I can accurately remember. He found out about the cookies, Sera said, smiling despite herself. Costa looked confused, which only made Sera's smile widen. Some context is better left private, she said. You are remarkably patient, she told Lorenzo one evening, watching him carefully not reach for her hand across the kitchen table despite clearly wanting to. You deserve patience, Lorenzo said simply. After what happened in this house, under my watch, you deserve considerably more than patience. But patience is what I can actually provide right now, so that is where I will start. Something warm cracked open in Sera's chest at that. The last of the defensive wall she had built over years of careful self-protection finally giving way to something steadier underneath it. She reached across the table and took his hand herself, watching his expression shift from careful restraint into something that looked, unmistakably, like the first unguarded relief she had ever seen from him. You did not have to wait for me to reach first, she said softly. Yes, I did, Lorenzo said. That is the entire point. After what happened, the next hand that touches you in this house should be one you chose to reach for, not one that was simply placed on you. Sera felt tears sting unexpectedly at her eyes, moved by the specific, deliberate care behind the gesture. You understand something most men never bother learning, she said. I understand that power without care is just another kind of violence, Lorenzo said. My father taught me that years ago, though I do not think I fully understood what he meant until watching you walk out of that laundry room 3 weeks ago with a bruise you should never have had to hide in the first place. 3 months later, Sera stood in the estate's main kitchen reviewing the week's household schedule. Lorenzo appearing in the doorway, not with coffee this time, but with a small wrapped package, he set carefully on the counter beside her. What is this? She asked. Open it. Inside was a small brass key on a simple chain. She looked up at him, questioning. That is the master key to every room in this estate, Lorenzo said. Including my study, the wine cellar, every space that has traditionally been restricted to family only. I want you to carry it because I want you to understand, plainly, that there is no door in this building that is closed to you anymore. Not professionally, not personally, not in any way that matters. Sera held the key in her palm, something enormous and quiet settling into her chest. You are giving me access to everything, she said. I am giving you the choice of access to everything, Lorenzo corrected gently. You decide which doors you walk through and when. Nobody else. That is the entire point of having the key. She closed her hand around it, warm metal against warm skin, and looked up at him with an expression that carried no remaining trace of the guarded, careful woman who had hidden a bruise in a laundry room 3 months earlier. Thank you, she said. Not for the key. For understanding exactly why the key matters more than anything else you could have given me. Lorenzo stepped closer, slowly, visibly, giving her every opportunity to step back if she chose to. She did not. He rested his hand against her jaw with a gentleness that felt entirely earned rather than assumed. I love you, he said. I have for considerably longer than I managed to say it. I simply needed to make certain you heard it from a man whose hands you already trusted, rather than one you were still deciding about. I decided weeks ago, Sera said. Somewhere around the morning you asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what you had already decided. That was the moment, Lorenzo. That was when I knew. He kissed her then, slow, certain, and entirely chosen. Both of them standing in a kitchen that had once held a hidden bruise and now held something considerably, permanently different instead. If you made it to this moment, you already know which part of this story mattered most, but we want to hear you say it. Was it the question he asked in that meeting, the hand she reached for first, or the key that opened every door? Tell us in the comments which detail you are still thinking about.